The majestic Qingyun Mountain range, towering and imposing, dominates the heartland. At its shaded northern foot flows the Grand Hanchuan River, while on its sunlit southern side lies the strategic town of Heian. Controlling a vital pass of the realm, the geographical position is extremely important. Qingyun Mountain stretches for hundreds of miles, with rolling peaks and ridges. Its 7 highest peaks pierce the clouds. Normally, only white clouds can be seen encircling the mountainsides, obscuring the true appearance of the summits. Qingyun Mountain is covered with dense forests, interspersed with cascading waterfalls and peculiar rock formations. Home to rare birds and exotic beasts, its scenery is renowned throughout the world for its secluded danger and extraordinary beauty. However, even more famous is the Cultivation sect residing within these mountains, the Qingyun sect. The Qingyun lineage boasts a long history, spanning over 2,000 years since its founding. It stands as the leader of both the righteous and demonic factions of the present age. The Qingyun sect has nearly 1,000 disciples, with numerous highly skilled individuals among them. Its prestige is illustrious, and it is considered one of the 3 great sects of the current era. Alongside Tianyin Temple and Incense Valley, its leader, Reverend Zhang Xiaofan, whose cultivation has reached the pinnacle of perfection, transcending the mundane and entering the realm of sages, is undoubtedly a peerless figure of the highest caliber. At the foot of Qingyun Mountain, about 50 miles northwest of the major city of Heian, lies a small village called Caomiao Village. It is home to more than 40 households. The villagers are simple and honest, mostly making their living by gathering firewood in the mountains and selling it to the Qingyun sect. They often witness Qingyun disciples soaring through the air, performing seemingly magical feats, and thus hold the Qingyun sect in great reverence. They believe them to be immortal cultivators who have attained the Tao. And the Qingyun sect, in turn, always takes care of the surrounding populace, treating the villagers of this area quite well. On this particular day, the sky is overcast, dark clouds hang low, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Looking from Caomiao Village, the imposing Qingyun Mountain seems to pierce the sky, its jagged peaks and bizarre rocks, exuding a faint sense of menace. However, the villagers have lived here for generations and have witnessed this kind of scenery countless times, paying it no mind. Let alone the ignorant children. "You brat! Where do you think you're going?" A shout, tinged with amusement, comes from a boy. He appears to be around 10 years old, with delicate features. He's leading 4 or 5 other boys and girls in pursuit of another child. The child ahead is about 2 years younger and shorter in stature. His face is currently wreathed in smiles as he sprints with all his might, occasionally turning back to make a face. "Zhang Xiaofan, I dare you to stop," the boy behind yells. The child called Zhang Xiaofan spits in response, running even faster. "You think I'm an idiot?" he retorts while running. On the way, they are getting close to the east of village. Their chase leads them closer and closer to the dilapidated Caomiao Temple at the eastern end of the village. From the outside, this small temple looks utterly run down, as if it has weathered countless storms of life. Zhang Xiaofan is the first to rush inside, but he unexpectedly trips over the door frame. Falling with a thud, the other children, delighted, pounce on him, pinning him to the ground. The delicate-featured boy wears a triumphant expression. "Got you. You have nothing to say now, do you?" However, Zhang Xiaofan rolls his eyes and says, "That doesn't count. You cheated me." "How can that count?" The boy is taken aback. "When did I cheat you?" he asks, puzzled. Zhang Xiaofan retorts, "All right, Lin Jingyu. Do you dare say you didn't put this door frame here?" The child called Lin Jingyu shouts. "That's not true." Zhang Xiaofan purses his lips, tilting his head, in a display of unwavering defiance and refusal to submit. Lin Jingyu's anger flares. He grabs Zhang Xiaofan's neck and shouts, "We agreed that if you were caught, you'd admit defeat. Do you yield or not?" Zhang Xiaofan pays him no mind. Lin Jingyu's face turns red, and he tightens his grip. "Do you yield or not?" he yells. Zhang Xiaofan's windpipe is constricted, making it increasingly difficult for him to breathe. His face slowly begins to flush. But despite his young age, he possesses an incredibly stubborn nature, refusing to utter a single sound. Lin Jingyu, however, grows angrier and angrier. his grip tightening further as he repeats, "Yield or not, yield or not, yield or not." At this point, the other children, sensing that things are getting out of hand, quietly back away, leaving only these two ignorant woes, locked in a stubborn battle of wills, driven by their own extreme personalities to persist in this manner. Just as a major catastrophe is about to unfold, a Buddhist chant suddenly echoes from the depths of the Caomiao Temple. Someone says, "Amachuofo, stop at once." A gaunt hand appears out of nowhere, extending two fingers to flick Lin Jingyu's hands. Lin Jingyu feels as if he's been struck by lightning. His entire body trembles, and his hands involuntarily release their grip. Zhang Xiaofan gasps for breath, clearly having been suffocated severely. The two of them are stunned where they stand. Coming back to their senses, they recall the previous scene, looking at each other with growing fear. Lin Jingyu stammers, "Xiaofan, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me." Zhang Xiaofan shakes his head, his breathing gradually returning to normal. "It's all right. Huh, who are you?" The children follow his gaze and see an elderly monk standing in the temple. His face is lined with wrinkles, and he wears a tattered kasaya. He's covered in dirt from head to toe, except for the string of jade prayer beads he holds, which are exquisitely translucent and dazzling, emitting a faint green light. Strangely, among the dozen or so uniform, lustrous green jade beads, there's a single round bead that is neither jade nor stone. Dark purple in color and utterly devoid of luster. The old monk doesn't answer, but meticulously examines the two children with his eyes. Lingering on Lin Jingyu for a few extra moments, he thinks to himself, excellent aptitude. But why is his temperament so extreme at this moment? Zhang Xiaofan steps forward and says, "Hey, who are you? I've never seen you before." Caomiao Village is located near Qingyun Mountain, where Taoism is revered and Buddhist disciples are extremely rare. Hence Zhang Xiaofan's question. The old monk glances at him, a hint of a smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He asks in return, "Young benefactor, just now your life was hanging by a thread. All you had to do was admit defeat. Why did you stubbornly persist? If this old monk hadn't intervened, you might have needlessly lost your life." Zhang Xiaofan is taken aback, realizing that the old monk's words do have some merit. But when it came down to it, he still couldn't explain his actions. So he just stands there, dumbfounded. Lin Jingyu glares at the old monk, pulling Zhang Xiaofan's hand. "Xiaofan, this old monk is weird. Let's ignore him." He pulls him towards the outside. The other children follow, evidently accustomed to following his lead. Zhang Xiaofan instinctively takes a step. But after walking a short distance from the temple, he can't help but turn back to look inside. He sees the sky darkening, and he can vaguely make out the old monk still standing there. But his features are already blurred. Night deepens, a clap of thunder sounds, and the wind whips the scattered clouds. Dark clouds churn in the distance. The wind and rain are about to arrive, creating an atmosphere of impending doom. The old monk is still in the Caomiao Temple, sitting cross-legged in meditation. He looks up and sees that Qingyun Mountain in the distance has become shrouded in mist. The surrounding fields are silent, with only the howling wind and thunder filling the air. What a fierce wind! A bolt of lightning flashes across the sky. The small Caomiao Temple, standing alone in the wind, is briefly illuminated. The old monk is now standing at the temple entrance. His expression solemn, he looks up at the sky, his brows furrowing deeper and deeper. In the village to the west, a black miasma has risen at some point, thick as black ink, churning incessantly. The old monk stands within the Caomiao Temple, staring intently at this black miasma. Suddenly, the black miasma coils and rises, heading straight out of the village. It's heading directly towards the Caomiao Temple. Its speed is extremely fast. Arriving in an instant, the old monk's sharp eyes catch sight of a child trapped within it. It's Lin Jingyu, whom he saw during the day. The old monk's expression darkens. Without hesitation, and without any apparent movement, his gaunt body abruptly rises into the air, plunging into the black miasma. From an unknown location within the darkness, a slightly surprised voice says, "Ha!" A few muffled sounds are heard, and the black miasma abruptly stops, hovering above the Caomiao Temple. The old monk, with Lin Jingyu tucked under his arm, slowly descends. But a piece of his kasaya has been torn away from behind by the faint light. It can be seen that Lin Jingyu's eyes are tightly closed. His breathing even, it's unclear whether he's asleep or unconscious. The old monk doesn't put him down. He looks up at the swirling black miasma in the sky and says, "Your Excellency's Taoist magic is profound, but why do you target an ignorant child? I fear you're losing your dignity." A hoarse voice comes from within the black miasma. "Who are you to meddle in my affairs?" The old monk doesn't answer, but says, "This place is at the foot of Qingyun Mountain. If the Qingyun sect were to learn of your Excellency's misdeeds here, I fear you would have a difficult time in the future." The person spits, his voice filled with disdain. "What's the Qingyun sect? They only rely on their numbers, old bald donkey. Don't say any more. If you know what's good for you, quickly hand over that child." The old monk puts his palms together. Amachuofo, a Buddhist monk, is compassionate. This old monk cannot stand idly by and watch this child suffer at your hands. The person shouts angrily, "You damned bald donkey! You're courting death," as he speaks. A deep red light flashes within the swirling black miasma. In an instant, around this small Caomiao Temple, and eerie winged howls, and ghostly energy surges. The venomous blood banner. The old monk's face suddenly erupts in anger. "Wretch! You dare to cultivate such a cruel and harmful evil artifact. I will not spare you today." The hoarse voice lets out a cold laugh, but doesn't answer. A whistling sound is heard, and the red light intensifies. From midair, a foul stench emanates, and a two-jong red banner slowly rises. At this moment, the sound of ghostly wails becomes even more piercing. It seemed as if countless vengeful spirits were wailing in the night, interspersed with the faint sound of rattling bones. A terrifying sound to hear. "Die, you damned bald donkey!" The person within the black miasma roared from the blood-red banner. A ferocious ghost face suddenly appeared, with 3 corners, 4 eyes, sharp teeth, and fangs, with a series of caw, 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 bone-rattling sounds. The 4 eyes on the ghost face suddenly all opened. With a roar, it transformed into a physical entity, charging out from the banner, carrying an overwhelming aura of blood, and attacking the old monk. The anger on the old monk's face intensified, knowing that the greater the power of this venomous blood banner, the more innocent people must have been killed during its cultivation to achieve such a level of power. It likely required the sacrificial blood of more than 300 people. This evil person is utterly devoid of conscience. Seeing the monstrous creature about to reach him, the old monk didn't put down the child Lin Jingyu, who was tucked under his arm. He only used his left hand, which held the jade prayer beads, to draw a circle in the air before him, forming the Buddhist lion seal with one hand, his 5 fingers flexing, with a faint golden light emanating from his fingertips. In a moment, a golden Dharma wheel materialized before him. Its golden light shone brilliantly, clashing with the monstrous creature in midair. "Such petty tricks, and you dared to show off." Before he could finish his sentence, his entire body suddenly trembled. He felt a bite on his right wrist, where he was holding the child Lin Jingyu. A numbing sensation immediately spread throughout half his body. His vision darkened, and the Dharma wheel before him began to wobble precariously. And at this very moment, the monstrous creature ahead underwent another strange transformation. In the center of its forehead, between its 4 eyes, with 2 caw sounds, another huge, blood-red eye opened. A foul whine arose, its power intensifying. With a ghostly howl, a blood-red light flashed, and the monstrous creature shattered the golden Dharma wheel, striking the old monk heavily in the chest. The old monk was sent flying backwards, and Lin Jingyu, who had been tucked under his arm, fell to the ground. Several muffled sounds were heard along the way, likely the sound of his ribs breaking. A moment later, his gaunt body slammed against the wall of the Caomiao Temple. With it, boom, dust flew, and an entire section of the wall collapsed. Ha ha ha. The person within the black miasma burst into a fit of wild laughter. Utterly triumphant, the old monk struggled to his feet, his throat feeling hot. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, staining the front of his monk's robes red. He felt dizzy, his entire body racked with pain, and the numbing sensation was increasingly approaching his heart. he forcibly calmed his mind, his gaze sweeping over Lin Jingyu, who was still lying unconscious on the ground. He saw a colorful centipede slowly crawling out from within his collar. It was as large as a palm, and the strangest thing was that its tail was divided into 7 segments, making it look as if it had 7 tails. Moreover, each segment was a different color, creating a vibrant display. But this beauty was tinged with a sense of horror. A 7-tailed centipede. The old monk's word sounded like a groan. The black aura on his face grew increasingly heavy, and blood continued to flow from the corner of his mouth. It seemed he could barely hold on, but he still stubbornly refused to fall. He looked at the swirling black miasma in midair, and said, "You placed this incredibly poisonous creature on that child. Deliberately concealed your strength, and seized the opportunity to strike me. You're after me, aren't you?" The person within the black miasma chuckled coldly, and said, "That's right, I came specifically for you. Puzhi, you bald donkey, if not for this, with your Tianyin Temple Buddhist cultivation, you wouldn't have been so easy to deal with. All right. Now quickly hand over the Blood Devouring Pearl, and I'll give you the antidote for the 7-tailed centipede." Sparing your life, Puzhi laughed bitterly, and said, "It's ironic that my name contains the word wisdom, yet I didn't expect that you, who cultivated this venomous blood banner evil artifact, wouldn't covet the Blood Devouring Pearl." His expression turned stern, and he said resolutely, "To ask me to give you this most vicious object in the world is a foolish dream." The person within the black miasma roared in anger, "Then go meet your Buddha." With a flash of red light, the venomous blood banner billowed in the wind, and ghostly cries echoed. The giant monstrous creature reappeared, circling briefly in the air before charging towards Puzhi again. Puzhi roared, his robes billowing without any wind. His originally thin body seemed to have expanded. With a forceful exertion of his left hand, a crisp sound was heard. The string of jade prayer beads had been snapped by him. The dozen or so translucent prayer beads didn't fall, but instead spun rapidly, each emitting a green light, floating before Puzhi. Only that single dark purple bead fell straight down. Puzhi flipped his palm, catching the dark purple bead in his hand. He formed the left and right water vase seals with both hands. His eyes wide, a faint golden light emanating from his entire body. He chanted, word by word, Om, Ma, Ni, Pad, Mi, Hum, the 6-syllable great bright mantra. The tone of the person within the black miasma immediately became more serious as Puzhi uttered the syllable, Hum. All the jade prayer beads instantly emitted a brilliant light. At the same moment, the monstrous creature summoned by the evil person had charged forward, its bloody aura assaulting the senses, but upon contact with the green light of the jade beads, it instantly dissipated into nothingness, unable to advance. They were locked in a stalemate in midair. Even so, Puzhi's body swayed again. The 7-tailed centipede was an incredibly poisonous creature, even with his centuries of cultivation. He still found it difficult to resist, but on his face, which was tinged with a faint black aura, a faint smile appeared, carrying a hint of solemnity. "Tai!" Puzhi roared, like a lion's roar, shaking the surrounding area. The jade prayer beads before him, driven by his Buddhist power, shone even brighter. Suddenly, one of the beads shattered with a pop, transforming into a Buddhist character in midair, charging forward and striking the monstrous creature's face. Wah! Yo! The monstrous creature let out a piercing shriek, immediately retreating several steps. Its surrounding red light greatly diminished, clearly injured. The person within the black miasma shouted angrily, "Good bald donkey!" He was about to make a move, but things happened in a flash. In an instant, 7 or 8 prayer beads transformed into Buddhist mantras and struck the monstrous creature. The monstrous creature shrieked continuously, retreating repeatedly, displaying fear. When it was struck by the 9th jade prayer bead, it finally let out a long howl, its 5 eyes bursting simultaneously. Its bones rattling. With a boom, it fell to the ground, struggling a few times before becoming rigid and slowly transforming into foul-smelling blood. At the same time, Puzhi let out a wow sound, spitting out another large mouthful of blood. And the color of the blood had turned black. Ah! A scream. At this critical juncture of the battle between these two powerful figures, came from the entrance of the Caomiao Temple. Puzhi and the evil person were both startled. The black miasma in the sky stirred. Puzhi also looked towards the entrance, where he saw the child he had met during the day, Zhang Xiaofan, who had somehow come to this Caomiao Temple, standing at the entrance, staring dumbfounded at the strange scene within the temple. The person within the black miasma let out a cold snort, without any apparent movement. The seven-tailed centipede that had been crawling on Lin Jingyu suddenly shook its tail, taking advantage of the momentum to fly up, as fast as lightning, flying towards Zhang Xiaofan. Puzhi's eyebrows shot up. He pointed with his right hand, and a jade prayer bead rushed forward. The seven-tailed centipede seemed to possess spiritual intelligence. Aware of the danger, and dared not resist, it shook its tail, using it like a wing to ascend, and plunged into the black miasma, and disappeared without a sound. The person within the black miasma said sinisterly, "Heh. Truly worthy of being one of the 4 divine monks of Tianyin Temple. Even severely injured, you were able to destroy my venomous blood corpse king. But after taking the corpse king's attack and being poisoned by the seven-tailed centipede, how long can you last? Just obediently hand over the blood devouring pearl." Puzhi, even his eyes now starting to bleed black blood, laughed bitterly, and said hoarsely, "Even if this old monk perishes here today, I will eliminate you, you evil demon." As soon as he finished speaking, all the jade prayer beads before him lit up simultaneously. The person in the sky immediately became vigilant. Suddenly, with a whistling sound, an object flashing with green light crashed into the black miasma from behind. It was the jade prayer bead that had previously attacked the seven-tailed centipede, which had flown a distance in the air, secretly controlled by Puzhi, to turn around behind the black miasma and launch a surprise attack. A furious roar was heard from within the black miasma, clearly caught off guard. A series of bang, bang, bang sounds rang out. Where the green light flashed, the black miasma scattered, finally dissipating in all directions. A tall, thin figure slowly descended from midair. His entire body was tightly wrapped in a black robe, making it impossible to discern his appearance or age. Only his eyes shone with a fierce light. On his back, he carried a long sword. Puzhi said in a low voice, "With such Taoist cultivation, why do you dare not show your face?" The black-robed man's eyes flickered with ferocity, and he said sharply, "Bald donkey, today I'll make sure you have no burial place." He drew the long sword from his back with a shuo sound. The sword was as clear as autumn water, bright but not dazzling, with a faint green light attached to it. "A fine sword," Puzhi couldn't help but exclaim. The black-robed man let out a low hum. Holding the sword formula in his hand, he stepped on the 7 stars. Taking 7 steps in succession, the long sword suddenly pierced the sky, and he chanted, "Nigh heaven's profound break, transform into divine thunder, the majestic power of heaven." Guided by the sword, in an instant, the dark clouds in the sky churned violently, thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed continuously at the edges of the dark clouds. The world was filled with a sense of savagery. A fierce wind arose. The divine sword lightning controlled true spell. Puzhi's face turned ashen in an instant, followed by a surge of surprise, a trace of despair, and a touch of inexplicable fervor. "You are a disciple of the Qingyun sect," in Zhang Xiaofan's eyes. He had never seen clouds, whether white or dark, so close to the ground as the dark clouds tonight. The thunder had never been so deafening, and the lightning had never been so blinding, making it almost impossible for him to look directly at it. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. He stood there dumbly, watching the black-robed man and the old monk in the Caomiao Temple glaring at each other, preparing to fight. Suddenly, a thunderclap exploded, making his ears ring. At that moment, he saw a dazzling bolt of lightning appear across the sky. It struck the human world, landing on the black-robed man's long sword. In an instant, the black-robed man's clothes billowed up, his eyes wide open, as if they were about to burst. At this moment, the interior of the thatched temple was as bright as day, illuminated by the intense flashes of lightning. The lightning that bloomed at the tip of the sword in the night was so beautiful that Zhang Xiaofan held his breath. In Puzhi's eyes, a strange fervor appeared once more. Was this the great power of Taoist true magic? The man in black roared, and with a flick of his wrist, guided by the sword incantation in his left hand, he thrust with all his might. A clap of thunder resounded. and the lightning on the sword shot towards Puzhi. Along the way, grass, trees, bricks, and stones were all violently flung aside, leaving only a deep, scorched scar on the path. Puzhi retreated 3 steps, withdrew his hand seals, and pressed his palms together. His face was solemn, and his entire body emitted a faint golden light. He chanted softly, "My Buddha is merciful," with a snap. The 7 remaining jade prayer beads in front of him shattered completely, transforming into a giant golden Buddha character 3 feet in front of him, radiating a dazzling light. It was blinding. The next moment, the lightning collided with the Buddha character. Zhang Xiaofan suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. It felt as if all the blood in his body had flowed backwards in an instant. His limbs went limp, and he couldn't breathe. He felt that in that single moment, the wind stopped, the thunder ceased, and the entire world came to a standstill. Then, he involuntarily flew backwards, before he even had time to feel fear. He saw a brilliant display of white and golden light, far surpassing the sun in the sky. The entire thatched temple shattered into pieces, flying outwards in all directions, including upwards, with the 2 battling figures at the center. His heart felt empty, and he could only hear the sharp whistling of the wind, constantly passing by his ears. He felt afraid and instinctively wanted to curl up, but he was powerless. He could only let himself drift towards the unknown. A thought surfaced in his mind: am I going to die? Intense fear suddenly gripped him, and he broke out in a cold sweat. Trembling slightly, when death stands before you, how should you face it? He fainted and lost consciousness. Puzhi slowly walked over, his steps faltering. He cradled Zhang Xiaofan and Lin Jingyu under his arms and carried them to a slightly cleaner spot, gently placing the 2 children down. He suddenly felt a searing pain throughout his body, as if he were about to split apart. He could no longer support himself and slumped to the ground. He looked down at his chest. Through his scorched tan smelly monk's robe, he could faintly see a black aura gradually encircling his chest, leaving only a small area around his heart untouched. He gave a wry smile and reached into his robe. His hand trembled violently. After a long while, he slowly retrieved a red pill, about the size of a fingertip, plain and unremarkable. Puzhi sighed and whispered, "I didn't think Gui's prediction would come true. I still have to take his 3-day death pill." He hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and swallowed the pill. Then, he raised his head and looked towards the distant mountains. Rain finally began to fall from the sky. Qingyun Mountain stood tall amidst the wind and rain, shrouded in a hazy mystique. Taoist magic was truly miraculous, capable of harnessing the power of the heavens. If it could be combined with Buddhist teachings, learning from each other's strengths, we could surely break through the mystery of immortality. It's a pity that although Dao Zhuan Zhenren's cultivation far surpasses mine, he is ultimately like my 3 senior brothers, unable to let go of sectarian views and status. Alas, Puzhi sighed deeply and withdrew his gaze, which fell upon the 2 children. The rain was growing heavier now, soaking their heads and faces. The thatched temple had been shattered in the previous battle, and there was no place nearby that could completely shelter them from the wind and rain. His heart suddenly tightened, and he couldn't help but worrying about these 2 children. He had forcefully channeled his true essence, and used Tianyin Temple's Daf and Boruo mystical skill, borrowing the power of the Buddhist treasure, the emerald prayer beads, to generate a demon-subduing force. Only then did he manage to block the unparalleled power of the evil man Shenjian, Yulazan and even inflict a serious counter-injury, forcing him to flee in terror. However, his severely injured body had also received a direct blow from the Taoist mystical technique. He was now utterly depleted, and even his last glimmer of life was extinguished. Right now, he was merely relying on Gui's miraculous 3-day death pill to prolong his life for 3 days. Although the evil man was seriously injured, his foundation was not damaged. After I'm gone, he will definitely return to kill and silence everyone. At that time, not only these 2 children, but I fear the lives of everyone in the village will be in danger. What should I do? Puzhi's mind was in turmoil. He was highly skilled and knowledgeable, but firstly, knowing that he was certain to die, his mind had already become somewhat disordered. Secondly, he was worried about the lives of innocent people. However, That evil man seemed to be a person of high status and position in Qingyun sect. If he rashly went up the mountain to seek help, he feared it would only make matters worse and do more harm than good. But what he regretted most was one other thing: that his lifelong ambition could not be fulfilled. As one of the four great divine monks of Tianyin Temple, he was revered by the world and enjoyed immense prestige, but for him, what was more important was to unravel the mystery of life and death and to break the knot of immortality. However, as early as 50 years ago, he had realized that no matter how diligently he cultivated Buddhist teachings, he could only increase his power and cultivation, but not solve the mystery of life and death. He pondered deeply, and decades later, he actually thought of an unprecedented method. Today, the three schools of Buddhism, Taoism, and the demonic sect were the most prosperous. With the highest and deepest attainments in magic, the demonic sect had a bad reputation, and their evil techniques were cruel and unprincipled, shunned by all. However, Taoist mystical techniques were profound and miraculous, and each had their own strengths compared to Buddhism. If they could be studied together, they would surely be able to break through the stalemate. But he never expected that his three senior brothers, who had always been open-minded, would unanimously oppose it. They considered it heresy and strange ideas, and even earnestly advised him against it, and willing to give up. He visited various famous Taoist sects several times, and even went up to Qingyun Mountain several times, but was invariably politely refused by Qingyun sect's leader, Daojuan Zhenren. Thinking of this, he gave a wry smile, feeling somewhat self-deprecating. He thought, "I only have 3 days to live. Yet I'm still thinking about immortality. Isn't this just needlessly worrying?" But although he had broadened his mind, seeing the two children still lying on the ground, he really couldn't let go. For a moment, he couldn't think of any good solution. He looked around and saw a pine tree in the distance that could still provide some shelter from the wind and rain. It was better than nothing. Immediately, he mustered his spirits, picked up the two children, and struggled to walk towards it. With great difficulty, he reached the tree, carefully placed the two down. Puzhi was completely exhausted and collapsed to the ground, leaning against the trunk, panting heavily. Heaven and earth are unkind, treating all things as straw dogs, this famous Taoist saying, carrying a hint of desolation and indignation, was spoken by Puzhi, slowly. The sky was like ink, covering the earth. Downless dark clouds pressed down, and rain fell from the sky, fine and dense. A cold wind blew, and the droplets, falling on his face, chilled him to the bone. He looked up at the sky for a long time before slowly lowering his gaze to the two children in front of him. He whispered, "Two young benefactors, this old monk had the intention to save you. But alas, I am powerless. This matter was started by me, but it has harmed the two of you instead. This is truly a sin. Alas, if you two were disciples of Qingyun, on Qingyun Mountain, among the people, you might be safer. But now," suddenly, Puzhi's whole body trembled, and he murmured, "Qingyun disciples, Qingyun disciples." His mind raced, as if he had grasped something, thought of something, yet it was about to slip away in the blink of an eye. In that instant, he broke out in a cold sweat. Then, in his eyes, for some unknown reason, that inexplicable fervor appeared again. He laughed loudly, but there was a hint of madness in his laughter. "Wonderful, wonderful, although my life is short. If I pass on Buddhist divine skills to one person and then have him join Qingyun sect to cultivate Taoist magic, wouldn't that kill two birds with one stone? It can both save their lives and fulfill my wish." The Buddhist and Taoist schools had been separated since ancient times, with no contact between them. Qingyun sect would never imagine that a young boy, who had lived at the foot of Qingyun Mountain since childhood, would possess Buddhist skills. As long as someone mastered both schools of learning, they would surely be able to break through the millennium-old mystery of immortality. Heh. If so, what regrets would I have in death? He made up his mind in an instant, and his whole being became incredibly excited. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were bloodshot. He subconsciously looked at Lin Jingyu, and his hand reached out, but halfway there, he stopped. He thought, "This matter is of great importance. The various sects and schools today have very strong sectarian views and are extremely wary of stealing skills, If it is known, and the matter is exposed, he will surely die. This child, Lin Jingyu, has excellent aptitude. If he is accepted into Qingyun sect, he will definitely receive a lot of attention from his teachers and elders. He is young, and I'm afraid he won't be able to keep this huge secret. Thinking of this, his heart stirred, and his gaze turned to Zhang Xiaofan. He remembered his unyielding nature during the day. Refusing to bow his head even in the face of death, he nodded and said, "It doesn't matter if his aptitude is a bit poor. In the future, it will depend on your own fortune." Without further delay, he reached out and patted Zhang Xiaofan several times, using his remaining Buddhist power to awaken him. Zhang Xiaofan slowly woke up. His vision was blurry, and his ears were still ringing. After a while, he recovered. When he saw clearly what was in front of him, he was startled and his mouth fell open. He saw the old monk sitting before him, covered in wounds. His left side looked like it had been burned, withered and unsightly. His face was covered in a heavy black aura, a deathly pallor, but for some unknown reason, the old monk was excited, his eyes full of smiles. He also saw his playmate, Lin Jingyu, lying beside him, unconscious. "You, what are you doing?" Zhang Xiaofan stammered after a long pause. Puzhi didn't answer, but examined him carefully. He asked, "Young benefactor, the wind is strong and the rain is heavy. Why did you, a small child, come to this remote place?" Zhang Xiaofan was stunned for a moment. "I saw you still standing in the temple in the evening. Later, I saw that it was going to rain. And this place is very dilapidated. I thought it would be very cold. So I came to bring you something to eat." Puzhi's lips twitched, and he pressed his palms together, saying, "Goat, goat. Everything is fate, predestined. My Buddha is merciful." Zhang Xiaofan asked curiously, "What did you say?" Puzhi smiled slightly and said, "This old monk is saying that young benefactor and I are fated. Since that is the case, this old monk has a cultivation method. Would young benefactor like to learn it?" Zhang Xiaofan said, "What is a method?" Puzhi was taken aback, then burst into laughter. He stretched out his withered hand and stroked his little head, saying, "It's not really anything, it's just teaching you some methods of breathing and exhaling. After you learn it, you have to promise me a few things." "Okay." Zhang Xiaofan seemed to understand, but still said, "Tell me." Puzhi said, "You must never tell anyone about this. Not even your closest relatives. Can you do that?" Zhang Xiaofan nodded and said, "I understand. I won't say anything, even if I die." Puzhi's heart trembled, seeing his young age. His face was unexpectedly filled with determination. The raindrops from the sky were like knives, swords, and frost, wetting his small face. Giving him a somewhat haggard look, Puzhi suddenly took a deep breath, lowered his eyelids, and stopped looking at him, but continued speaking. "Also, you must practice this method once every day. But you cannot practice it in front of others. You can only do it when it is late at night and quiet. Finally, unless it is a matter of life and death, you must never use this technique. Otherwise you will surely encounter great misfortune." Saying this, he opened his eyes again and stared at Zhang Xiaofan. "Can you do it?" Zhang Xiaofan hesitated for a moment, tilted his head, and scratched his head, looking confused, but in the end, he nodded heavily. Puzhi smiled slightly, and without further ado, he began to teach him a set of incantations. This set of incantations was not long, only about 1,000 words, but it was obscure and difficult. Zhang Xiaofan used all his effort, and it took him a full 3 hours to memorize it completely. When Puzhi saw that he had fully memorized it, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. His expression extremely weary, he looked at Zhang Xiaofan. Unable to suppress the loving look in his eyes, he said, "This old monk has never had the thought of taking in a disciple in his life. I didn't expect that at the time of my death, I would have the fate of a master and disciple with you. Speaking of which, you should also know my name." He paused and said, "My Dharma name is Puzhi, and I am a monk from Tianyin Temple." "Ow, child, do you know Tianyin Temple?" Zhang Xiaofan thought for a moment, then shook his head. Puzhi smiled wryly and said, "You really are a child." Then he seemed to remember something, reached into his robe, and felt for a deep purple bead. He looked at it carefully for a few moments, then handed it to Zhang Xiaofan. saying, "You must keep this bead well hidden. Do not let outsiders see it. When you are settled down in the future, find a deep valley or cliff and throw it down there. That's all. Also, the name I just told you. You must never tell anyone else." Zhang Xiaofan took the bead and said, "I understand." Puzhi stroked his head and said, "For us to have such a karmic connection, I wonder if we will meet again in the next life. Child, kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times. And call me Shifu." Zhang Xiaofan looked at Puzhi and saw that he had put away his smile, and his face was solemn. He immediately nodded in agreement, called out, "Shifu," and knelt down on the ground, kowtowing heavily 3 times, just as he finished kowtowing. And before he could raise his head, he heard Puzhi laugh softly, but there was a hint of bitterness and determination in his laughter. Zhang Xiaofan was about to look up at him when he suddenly felt a pat on his back. He immediately blacked out and fainted again. In the early morning, the rain finally stopped. Water droplets on the trees were crystal clear, quietly sliding down from the edges of the leaves. Falling down because of the wind, they drew beautiful arcs in the air, landing on Zhang Xiaofan's face. The icy coldness awakened Zhang Xiaofan from his dream. He opened his eyes and instinctively wanted to call out, "Shifu," but there was no one around. Only Lin Jingyu lying beside him, sound asleep. It seemed like a dream. That the shattered thatched temple in the distance, and his sleeping playmate beside him told him that all of this was real. He was stunned for a while, then shook his head. He walked over to Lin Jingyu and pushed him hard. Lin Jingyu mumbled a few words and slowly woke up. Rubbing his eyes, before he could speak, he felt a chill and couldn't help but sneeze. He opened his eyes and saw that he and Zhang Xiaofan were soaking wet, lying under a pine tree in the wild. He was dumbfounded and said, "Weren't I sleeping at home? How did I get here?" Zhang Xiaofan shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know either, but I'm very cold. Let's go back quickly." Lin Jingyu had many questions in his mind, but he was indeed cold, so he nodded, got up, and ran with Zhang Xiaofan towards the village. Before they even reached the village, they noticed something was wrong. Usually, at this time, the villagers would have already gotten up, but today it was unusually quiet, not a single person in sight. Moreover, with the morning breeze, there was a faint smell of blood. They looked at each other and saw the surprise and doubt in each other's eyes. They simultaneously quickened their pace and ran towards the village. Before long, the two reached the entrance of the village. Looking in from the main road at the village entrance, they saw that in the open space in the middle of the village, the 40-odd households of Caomiao Village, over 200 people, big and small, men and women, were all lying on the ground, their bodies stiff, dead. Blood flowed like a river, and flies swarmed. The smell of blood was overwhelming. Seeing this terrifying scene, Lin Jingyu and Zhang Xiaofan were so frightened that they screamed and fainted.